State your name for the record.
It's Deb Broad, or DC Broad. I write as DC Broad.
Where did the DC come from?
Because my first name is Deborah, and my maiden name is Coben.
But was there a big thought behind using DC instead of using Deb?
Yes, there was. My first book, my first Quint McCauley book, Murder in Store, was written first person, male point of view. So I didn't want people to be confused. Have to make assume it was a female protagonist and then have to.
Why did you end up choosing writing from a male point of view?
I don't know. I'm still not sure about that. It was way back. And I don't know, I had read, I didn't really come to mysteries until kind of later. My mom was a big Agatha Christie fan, and I've never been a huge fan of the cozy kind of,
Right.
They're fine, but they're just not for me. And then I didn't pick up it wasn't until I picked up a John D. MacDonald book, The Lonely Silver Rain, which was his last one. And I thought, this character could be that. And I think maybe that's why I chose to go the male, I'm not sure. But I think it did allow me to make him a little bit softer in a way, he would have had to have been tougher if he were a woman in order to get by.
Sure.
But he doesn't have to be.
Did you spend a lot of time with Quint McCauley in your head before you actually sat down to write the first draft of Murder in Store? And even in those early drafts of Murder in Store, did the character change as you got more comfortable writing from his perspective?
Yeah, I did spend a lot of time with him in my head. In fact, before he was a private detective, he was a starship captain.
Seriously?
Seriously. I love science fiction, but he just had the wrong attitude.
Great.
He had the wrong attitude. And that's why I will be forever grateful to John D. MacDonald. And then I did read a lot of those kinds of books. I love Ross MacDonald and Ross Thomas and I didn't really realize there were female detectives out there. Sarah Paretsky was writing at the time, but I was kind of late coming to her, and so he was in my head. It was kind of a voice that was there, but once I got him down on paper, he grew, and with each book he's not one of these static characters. He's changed with every book.
Right.
I like to think he's grown. He's it's more fun for me to write that way, to give him a little bit of a character arc. And as I became more comfortable, I moved him from Chicago to the suburbs because that's where I live.
Right.
And one of the fun things about writing a series is that you can develop the supporting cast, which is almost as much fun as the main character. And so then as he reacted to different people in his life, he and reacts to living in the suburbs as opposed to the city, he does change a little bit. He was never a real macho type, which made it easier to write for me anyway. And he never carried a gun. Most of the time he didn't carry a gun. He was just kind of when you're in the suburbs and you're a private detective, you don't expect people to be shooting at you, and it just didn't seem logical to me. So he is not really a hard-boiled. I think of him as about an 8-minute egg. He's just not,
Did moving him from Chicago to the suburbs ease maybe some intimidation that would come with writing in that traditional what is expected of Chicago internationally, like Capone and
Okay. I think to a degree I realized I didn't have to make him as hard-boiled as maybe I did in the first book. I could add a little of suburbia to him, and he could be still kind of, I always liked the private detective as I began to read more and more, because it's sort of the paladin character, and I've
Right.
always, and so he can still be that, but in the suburbs and with a little, without being in a tough environment, but still have, one of the things I like about writing the suburbs is that it has sort of this very civilized veneer to it, but underneath there's all kinds of stuff going on, and that to me was more interesting than the more stark setting of the city, I think. And there's just lots of layers, lots of people with lots of secrets, and not that there aren't in the city, but there's that facade almost.
Right, that everything is normal.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about working Quint back into another book? I mean, does Quint still talk to you?
Oh, yeah, he does. I would definitely do him in a short story. He's actually in 2 short stories that I wrote. Yeah, I think it would be fun to go back to him at some point, but especially a short story. I'm not sure. I would age him some, I think.
Right.
Because it's funny, when I started writing him, he was older than me. He's not anymore.
Now you've caught up.
No, I passed him up.
So Quint was originally going to be a starship captain, and you mentioned liking sci-fi.
Yeah.
You wrote Heartstone, and was that what sort of departure was it to sort of get into breaking away from crime and moving on to Heartstone?
That was a real love project. I loved writing Heartstone. It took me a long time to write it, but it's just something that, I love mythology and I love Celtic lore and all that, and so it was and I do intend to write a sequel to that, because there's a real obvious at least one more book. But it was a nice departure, and I enjoy fantasy, but there's a little fantasy in it, but not a lot, and it's not really introduced until later in the book. But I love Arthurian legend, and I got the idea. I was actually going to write a book about a brother and sister gemologist team, and I went and talked to this guy who was a gemologist, and he was showing me some of these gemstones, and he showed me some alexandrite. And it's a stone that changes color depending on whether it's in natural lighting or artificial. And I thought, oh, I like that. That's going to go in a book. And and I'm thinking, what can I do with it? Actually, it's only been around since it's named after Tsar Alexander. So but it's a stone, so it's been around much longer than that. So I thought, what can I do with that's really special with this? And it can't be a monetary thing, because it's got to be more than that. So I put it in the hilt of Excalibur. And the beauty of the Arthurian legend is that it grew from just like one recording in an historical, and it just, everything gloms onto it. So I felt that it was something I was safe in.
Do you run into stories, and in this case the Arthurian legend, but also any other stories that just sort of grab you so much that you feel like you have to somehow incorporate them into a book, just in your daily life? I mean, do you run into things like that that fascinate you?
Yeah. And I love to eavesdrop, and really just a little snippet of conversation overheard will just kind of bore into my head like a tick, and then eventually
and then become that spinning out of the Arthurian legend. It takes on its own thing.
It does, yeah.
What about Robyn Guthrie? What made you switched from a male protagonist to a female protagonist, and you've dealt with not just crimes and the solving of those, but also and I think what's touched a lot of people is the relationship between Robyn and her mother, and the sort of very human side of this. That this isn't just look, something bright is flashing over here and here's a loud noise. It's very much about the human connection.
It is, yeah.
What drove you to that?
It was my own mother. Lizzie is my mother, who passed away about 6-7 years ago. And prior to that, she was in an assisted living place, and she had dementia. It was not Alzheimer's, but because she didn't recognize me. But it was a very difficult time to go through, and it's very expensive. Assisted living is very expensive, and she had so much money, and once that ran out, we weren't sure what we were going to do. And I remember thinking, if I could steal the money and get away with it, I might think about that. And I mentioned that to a friend, and I just saw her light up, and I thought, I've got an idea here.
And that's where Getting Sassy was born.
A lot of people are going, and it's, you want to do the best for your parents, but I didn't want her to move in with me because, that would not have worked.
Right.
And, physically where my husband and I live, and also just, she had a lot of things brought on by the dementia that kept her up much of the night and everything. So she really is Lizzie, and I think she'd be really pleased with what I've done with Lizzie, because my mom, and some of the stories I use were, like the time my mother loved to smoke. I mean, she was a smoker, and she had COPD, so she wasn't supposed to smoke. And she wasn't, after we moved her in there, she was doing real good, but she started sneaking cigarettes from, and I got a call from there, and they said, yeah, your mom she was in her room, and we tried to get in. We smelled smoke, and she put her walker up against the door so they couldn't get the door open. And so that kind of stuff just, and now I get people telling me stories about their folks, stuff they've gone through. And it's one of those things when you're going through it, it's so difficult, it's heartbreaking, but it's also kind of funny in ways, and you almost often don't see the humor until later. Because sometimes you just have to keep talking to them like, they're... At one point, we were taking her to another facility for evaluation. She thought she was in England. It was partly her medications. It was just really weird. And she's going on about going golfing. And so my husband and I were just, okay, we'll get there soon,
We'll go get your bag, hold on.
It'll be fine. And we got there, and she says, well, where's the golf? And so, but it was a real learning experience, and it was. I was trying to do the best I could for her. And that's what Robyn is doing, I think, with her mom.
So Robyn is, there's certainly a lot of biographical.
Yeah, Robyn's probably the closest character to myself I've
Was that
read.
scary as a writer?
A little bit, yeah. Because, it forced me to look at some things that were kind of hard to deal with. And that was scary. But I pushed through it, and, I'm hoping it.
Do you think going through that whole experience changed you as a writer just from the way that you approach storytelling? I mean, was there I don't want to say honesty or depth to things, but like if you're mining what you're mining to get to what you're writing and getting sassy and then getting lucky, it seems to me there'd be an emotional investment that, because this is based on a real person as opposed to Quint. Did it change the way that you approached storytelling? I
think so. I think it made me look deeper into characters. And, I've always tried to kind of make my stories character-driven, but this was really, it's not only something I need to do, it's something I want to do. I wanted to know what she was going through, and I wanted to, and that is kind of, I'm doing that with more characters now, even supporting ones. I'm just... It's a more intimate experience, which sounds weird, but the writing.
I don't think it sounds weird at all. I mean, I think that's.
Yeah, whereas it's kind of easy to be more surface, but I'd rather write deeper, and I think that's why, these stories aren't, as, they're plot driven, but there's just a lot of relationship stuff
real
going
humanity
on.
in it. Yeah. There is.
And I want to keep doing that, I guess, because that's the kind of writing I'm sort of evolving into, I guess. Yeah.
With Robyn's progression into a third book and a fourth book, or however many books it ends up being, what do you see coming from your own life? And what part do you have to fictionalize, and what part is inspired by real life? And do you notice as you're living through things, thinking to yourself, okay, this is going in a book, like this is part of what Robyn is going to face at some point?
Yeah. She's going to have issues with her mom in the next book, which is tentatively titled "Getting Back." I'm not crazy about that, but we'll see. But but she's. Her mother has developed, and this is what's interesting too, is relationships people develop in the assisted living. My mom had this gentleman friend she would have wine with every night. I don't think it went beyond that, but it was like, who knows,
Right.
So Lizzie's going to have kind of a gentleman friend at the beginning, and what comes of all that, and it's just stuff I pick up from hearing people talk about their own parents, and people seem willing, very willing to share the stuff that goes on, in their lives when they're trying to deal with all this. And but I get interested in different things, and I think this next one is going to have something to do with Indian artifacts, and So, bringing stuff like that in, and just, I just, I'll read something in a newspaper and, file it in my head, or, that's sort of where that one's going, but I'm not, I kind of know how that one's going to end too, actually. It's sort of a puzzle thing. It's sort of a puzzle mystery more than a caper, I guess. But
Do you have in mind a long arc for Robyn? Do you, if it were turned into, say, like a Murder, She Wrote, do you have a long arc that you know what the trajectory of Robyn's life looks like from this point forward?
To a degree, yeah. I think the hardest thing to do in something like that, because she's got this relationship with Mick, her kind of boyfriend, and in the second book, that's sort of, because she tells him she's not sure she wants kids, and I kind of like that because it's sort of a flip of what it usually is, and he's like, well, I don't know if I, so
Right.
so at the end of the book, they haven't really. They're still friends, but don't really know where it's going. So that's going to be I think that's the hardest thing to maintain momentum with, is a relationship. So I'm not sure what I do with that, but I because I want to keep making it interesting. But yeah, I could definitely keep going with this, and with the mother, but again, that's going to be she's going to get worse. That's the thing about
Right.
people with dementia; they don't get any better,
Right.
and so I think I would deal with more challenges with her mother after the third one. I think there would be some more issues there.
When you were talking about the Quint series, you said how much fun it was to create the secondary characters, to sort of create this world. Do you, or has it been your experience, like writing Lizzie or writing Mick, that these people sort of want to steal the show a little bit?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with?
I had to deal with that, yeah. Sometimes I let them, but usually I just promise them bigger parts later, and they're okay with that. But it was funny, in Heartstone, there's a character named Earl who is, I was just going to kill off early on. He was going to be a small-time burglar and all that. And, but I really liked him. And I realized after, I'd been writing him for a while, I realized that his was the only character who really didn't have anything invested other than wanting to stay alive. and also, he had an interesting perspective that none of the others did, and I was able to, kind of weave him in. So he's a pretty popular character in the book. So yeah, sometimes I do let them sort of have their way with me, but sometimes
You have to be stern.
you have to be stern. Yeah. I tend to write kind of organically. I don't usually plot ahead, although the next one I sort of have figured out. But so sometimes I'll just let them take me for a while, and then see where it's going, and if it's not going a place I want, I
Take a different path.
take a different path. Yeah.
Okay, this is a subject that is not literature related.
Okay.
Except one that deals in years of heartbreak.
Okay.
You and I share an affinity for the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah.
How long have you been a Cubs fan?
My dad was a Cubs fan. That's sort of how I bonded with him when I was a kid. We had our TV in the basement, which was not, it was not finished or anything. It was just, old basement with beat up couch, and the TV was down there because you didn't put the TV in the living room then. And hot summer days, I would go down there because that's the cool place.
Right.
And he'd be watching baseball. And I remember, Ron Santo and all that. I was a big Ron Santo fan because of my dad. And we would be sitting there, and I'd ask him questions. And, he just, like, after a while, it was like all these questions. And so, yeah, it's because of my dad. Well, my dad was from the South Side, but he was a
So you
Cubs
should have
fan.
been a Sox
Yeah,
fan.
Yeah, I should have been a South Sider. But there's something about the Cubs that really feeds my muse. I have written 3 short stories involving the Cubs.
That's where we worked together. First.
There is something about them that just, there's a romantic thing to that or something. I don't know.
It's a romantic fatalism.
Yeah,
of
it's a
sorts.
fatalism. Yeah, and all these fans who have the same angst. That it's a great bonding thing. Yeah, but someday, and if they win, what's that going to change?
And,
if
and it might change something.
Yeah.
It might sort of change.
Mhm.
And there may just be a universal necessity for the Cubs to come close and
Yes, yes.
always disappoint us.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
heaven knows we shouldn't be happy or anything
No,
like that.
no, that's part of our persona, you know?
Right.
Oh, Cubs fan. You tell somebody you're a Cubs fan, they go, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. You know,
Exactly.
it's like-
You can, there's 30 other teams you could choose if you wanted
Right,
to.
yeah, a lot of them are doing really well.
Yeah, but I can't. Like, I'm so invested in the Cubs.
No, you're not even, are you?
I'm not even from Chicago. My brother, his father was a Cubs fan, so my brother was a Cubs fan. My brother's 10 years older than me.
Okay.
And so I wanted to be like my older brother. And the first Cubs team that I actively rooted for was the '83 Cubs. And there was Jody Davis and Leon Durham and Ron Say and Larry Boa and Ryan Sandberg. And, you know, what joy it was to listen to Harry Carey call a ball game.
Yes.
Even though he was drunk. You know, as a kid, I didn't realize how drunk he was by the
It was
third
so
inning.
funny. He was so, well, the very first thing I ever published was a story called The Nights the Lights Went Out at the Tattersall Tavern. It was published by Alfred Hitchcock. And it was set the night the Cubs played their first night game in Wrigley Field, 8-8-88. And, you know, there's the power failure in the middle of it. And the people watching in the bar, there's a power failure. And there's a crime that occurs during that power failure. But, yeah, it just, and I wrote that story like the day after the game. It just, you know, hit me and, you know, yeah. They should all be that easy to write, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories, particular Cub memories that just stick in your head? You mentioned Ron Santo, but like, is it just, like for me, when you said Ron Santo, I don't know why he is stuck in my head as the most of all of my Cubs things, but Lee Smith walking in from the bullpen when he would just take forever to get there, but he was just this intimidating guy, and he would throw it so hard, and I would just be like, oh, that guy's so good. And, and I can always just see Lee Smith, and I've listened to interviews with him, and he sounds like such a cool and laid back guy, but I just remember watching him being like, like the other team's in trouble now, here comes Lee Smith.
Royko would say he looked like he was spelling something bad when he was at the plate. He had that look in his face. I was a big Bobby Dernier fan, I just always really liked him, you know, and players. And then when I wrote the shortstop story, Terrio was a shortstop, so I liked him briefly, and then they, you know, but
Such promise. There was that weird time where there's Terrio, Fontenot, Soriano, Zambrano. There's all these O-ending names.
Yes, it was. But, a lot of good memories, though, just watching the games and sitting in the bleachers or on one of the rooftops across. That was fun. And,
I dated a girl who lived at 918 Waveland, so it was...
Is that why you dated her?
No, it wasn't. But it was certainly a perk when she said, oh, by the way, my mom had right across the street from Wrigley. I was like, what? Seriously? You can do that? It was a good time. All right, well, thank you for sitting down with me.
Well, thank you.
And everyone should go out and get, everything is available. The whole Quint series is now available electronically.
With really nice covers, too, I might add.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
They did a nice job on that.
And Heartstone is available, and Getting Lucky just came out in December.
Yeah.
And we're figuring out Getting Back.
I think
Tentatively. The title.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Ben.